1, 2, 3.
Thing about the sound last time? Yeah.
Test, test.
Oh, you gotta do it like this.
Can you use this microphone or that one?
Random, I've got hand cream everywhere.
I did.
Sit back
Yep.
in the chair.
I've now joined council.
Love it.
No.
Okay, so if you want to
I will.
talk and then I'll wait a few seconds.
Yep. Testing for YouTube. Regular council meeting, January 22nd, 2022. This is a test. Paula, this is a test. Can you hear me?
So, when you do that tour, housing tour at UBCM, so were they talking about like a rapid housing thing or was it something different? 'Cause I
This
pulled
is a
that out of the
test.
paper from Saturday.
Yeah.
It was like, it wasn't rapid housing. Okay. Well, what I was trying to understand, I've been trying to understand, and I think that version is they're talking about like when they put them into the single room occupancy hotels, like when they pulled the vulnerable off the streets at the beginning of COVID. But there were a couple of different versions of it, that are talking about how like there's so many vulnerable people in so many ways, right? Not just vulnerable health-wise or abuse-wise or whatever. There's so many things, but it was just, I was kind of like, I mean, they're talking about having created some things that are under units. So I dropped the money back. No, this is Ottawa. It's the federal government talking about this program. Create these things, but you either have to keep something. People need homes. Or you've got to figure out a way.
Bo asked David the other night, do you know what pi is? And my answer would be
Welcome, everyone. This regular council meeting is called to order at 4 p.m. on January 25th, 2022. Council would like to acknowledge the Euclid thought on whose traditional territories the District of Euclid operates. Notice of video recording, audience members and delegates are advised that this proceeding is being video recorded and broadcast on YouTube and Zoom, which may store data on foreign servers. Adoption of the minutes, January 11th, 2022, regular minutes. Any errors or omissions?
Excuse me. Just a point, we have late agenda items that were provided to council earlier.
Yes, there are 2 late items. Has everyone got those 2 items? Okay, perfect. Now we'll move on to adoption of the minutes. Any errors or omissions?
Sorry, pardon me. We actually need a resolution to adopt those 2 late items into the agenda, please.
I'll move that we adopt the late items.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Approved. Carried. Now, we will try and adopt the January 11th regular minutes. Any errors or omissions? Hearing none, may I have a motion to adopt the minutes as presented?
So moved.
Councillor Cole. All in favor? Carried. And icon to speak, and if you are attending by telephone, hit *9. Are there any members of the audience who wish to speak? That would be no. Paula, are there any members of the public that wish to speak by Zoom or telephone?
We do have a hand raised on Zoom.
Okay. Go ahead.
Hello, Paul. Can you hear us?
There you go. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, this is Paul Barrett in Seattle. I'm one of the owners of Francis Island, and I'm not sure this is the moment you wanted to discuss the OCP, but I have comments about that, and I sent a letter which should have arrived to the mayor and Mr. Gregg a short time ago, and I'm not sure it could have gotten to you. Did any of you receive that?
Unfortunately, we do not take any further input after the public hearing is closed, and that happened last Thursday, so we're not allowed to take any further input. I'm sorry.
This is regarding the change, the rather global size change that was made on December 7 last month.
We aren't allowed to have public input after the public hearing is closed.
But I mean, am I correct that the public hearing could be closed that fast regarding the marine conservation designation I learned of the very first time on a December 7 of last year?
The opportunity for public input was at the public hearing, which was last Thursday.
But you weren't notified.
Yeah, I received no notice of that. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that we have grave problems with the OCP and have objected to it in writing twice and have received no significant response from you. And I want to make sure that you are aware that as the owners and people who have paid taxes for the last 33 years, we're very opposed to these restrictions that are being unilaterally placed.
I think I'll refer this to our CAO for comment.
Thank you, Chair McEwen. Unfortunately, there was a notice that was given out to the public to attend the public hearing over the course of several weeks prior to the public hearing. As a point for the bylaw and process, unfortunately, council is unable to hear or consider any additional opinions or thoughts from the public on the OCP at this time. The opportunity for public input was on Thursday, or this past Thursday, and at this point in time, council is unable to receive any additional information or perspectives on the OCP.
I would respectfully urge that you make an exception to this, since we did not receive notice of that, and this is a huge addition to the OCP, which was made prior to the Christmas holidays at a time when most of us were trying to live through COVID and problems like that.
Unfortunately, sorry to interrupt, but at this point in time, there is no opportunity for council to reconsider accessing additional information with respect to the public hearing that was last Thursday. During the council meeting, council will be deliberating upon the OCP as a report from staff, and at that point in time, council will be considering all the different aspects and input from the community that they had received on on the public hearing. So at this point in time, we're unfortunately would have to discontinue discussions through the public input period as per council regarding the OCP.
It,
There is an opportunity at the very end of the meeting for public input if you would like to talk to us then. Paula, are there any other members of the public that wish to speak by Zoom or telephone?
There are no other hands raised on Zoom and no callers at this time.
And have we received any emails to communityinput@euclid.ca?
Other than the letter related to the OCP, we have no further correspondence at this time.
Okay, thank you. Is there any unfinished business? No? All right, Committee of the Whole. We have 2 Committee of the Whole reports today. May I have a motion that Council go into a Committee of the Whole meeting at 4:08 p.m. to discuss items 9.1 and 9.2 on the agenda?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor? And carried. Our first report is from the Chief Administrative Officer regarding the Barclay Community Forest Funds. Mr. Lawrence, can you please provide us a summary of your report?
Thank you. So this report is to open discussions with council as to their direction for how they would like to ingrain how this council and future councils can use the Barclay Community Funds from the Barclay Community Forest. So in about 2004, a joint partnership was achieved with the Toquat Nation, with the District of Euclid. Since 2019, approximately $2.9 million was received as dividends from that project, and approximately $970,000 currently remains unallocated for various projects. And council over the years since 2019 has allocated funds based on the current need, including funds for the emergency generator, affordable housing, the Tugwell Recreation Facility project. There was $50,000 investigation and another tentative $950,000 to allocate towards that. Back in March of 2020, council had asked for the staff to bring a report back to develop a policy with respect to how do we want to use these funds, was the basic premise. So this Committee of the Whole report is to open up sort of discussions on some of the options that council could consider ingraining into policy or bylaw as to how those funds could be used. So there's 4 areas that we've considered at this point in time. Unrestricted general revenue. So what that means is that the funds come into the district and they are allocated into the general revenue fund from that year, and council of the day can decide how those funds are used in any manner they so choose. This is the most open and flexible avenue for council to consider. There's no restrictions. If there's a priority project, they could allocate those funds to that as they come in. The downside of this option is that there's, generally speaking, less planning around how those funds are being used. So there's less strategy with respect to using the funds in just a general opportunity based system. The next one is restricted general revenue. So similarly to general revenue, as the funds come in, they can be used, but council could ingrain in bylaw or policy specific aspects or specific types of projects that those funds could be used for. If you think back to the gas tax fund, it can only be used for certain projects. That would be a similar aspect. You would designate whether it's for affordable housing, parks and recreation, environmental sustainability, whatever it is that council feels is important for the community to fund over the years that the forest funds will be coming into the district. A third option is dedicated reserve funding. So this is more restrictive again. In a dedicated reserve, council determines how much of the split of funds coming in would go to a dedicated reserve fund for specific things. So that could be if council wanted to fund, say, a health center, right? And they wanted to build up revenue for a health center, you make a dedicated reserve, you fund that as funds come in, and then once the funds are available, matching grants are realized, then the project can be moved forward. If the project is abandoned at some point in time for whatever reason, then the council of the day could reallocate those dedicated reserve funds through another bylaw to whatever project it is, however that council saw fit. This is a little bit more restrictive, and it is limiting future council's ability to utilize those funds as they see fit. So it does set precedent, right? But it does make sure that there's thought that goes into where these funds should go, and it is restrictive in that you're basically tying the hands of future councils. But it generally says that these are important projects that we can't afford yet, but we want to fund and are important to the community. The last one is a little bit of a unique option, is a legacy fund investment fund. This is not done often, but it is out there periodically. This is basically taking the funds realized, or a portion of the funds realized from the Barclay Community Forest, investing those, and then spending the dividends. This provides a lasting source of revenue that can be used by the council of the day for, generally speaking, smaller projects. Right? It only works really in order of magnitude. If the initial investment or the total investment is too small, then the dividend coming back from that investment is too small to really make worthwhile. So if council were to consider this, it'd have to be fairly hefty contribution to make sure that any investment coming back from year to year is worth the energy and worth reserving those funds for that action. Those are sort of the 4 different types of opportunities council could consider, and staff is looking for general direction from council at this point in time as to which of those opportunities, or another one as council may see fit, or a combination thereof, that council would like staff to pursue in either a bylaw and a policy. One last piece to this is with respect to the bylaw or policy. So within a policy, it does set out the guidelines as to how the funds should be used, and if you're doing a dedicated reserve, there is a requirement for a bylaw. But the other is the general revenue side. You could consider, or council could consider, putting it in policy. The downside about that is you can ignore policy, right? It doesn't there's no process for ignoring it. The council of the day could say, no, we don't like it today, and we're just going to ignore it and move forward with whatever that opportunity is. Within a bylaw, there is a process that would have to be undertaken by council to reconsider the distribution of those funds moving forward, and it becomes a little bit more transparent because there's a process that would need to be followed to ensure that it's open and clear how the funds are going to be used. So those are the 2 questions that staff are looking for direction from council, is bylaw or policy, and which of the 4 opportunities there is interested in pursuing.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Just a quick question. I don't know if you know the answer to this, but are we expecting another dividend from the community forest this calendar year, or should we just focus on the 970 that's before us right now?
We have heard that there should be another dividend coming, but I would recommend for council to consider it outside of the available funds. This isn't about the dollars that are in front of council today. It is more about setting up this council and future councils into the future about how do you want the funds coming from the community forest to be allocated and spent, whether it's project specific, do you want to reserve it, put it into reserve funding, legacy fund, etc. So it's staff is not asking council direction on allocating funds to a specific project today. That's not what this report is asking.
Yes, I was just thinking about the Legacy Investment Fund, and you've given an example here of for every million investment, a 5% return would see the community receive $50,000 a year. So just trying to get my head around how much money we actually have or may have in order to explore that option.
I would be able to say that, you know, the up at the top is a summary of the expenses or the allocations so far, and those allocations can be re-looked at as well moving forward, and future dividends, like if you're not hitting that magic threshold, whatever that amount is, future dividends could go towards that, or a portion of them until you reach it. It's more of a, I wanted to give council an idea of what it would look like based on, you know, simple math of 5%, $1 million, $50,000. If you put $500,000 in now and waited for a future dividend, that, say, 50% of each dividend coming forward goes into reserve, 50 or into a legacy, 50% goes into whatever the reserve is or other opportunity. So at this point in time, the dollar figures aren't critical.
Thank you. So question number 1, how does council wish to utilize the Barclay Community Forest funds of those 4 variations? Does someone want to start?
Pick me.
Councillor Cole.
Okay, so thank you for this report. And I just want to put a shout out to all the humans who worked for so very long to actually make the Barclay Community Forest an actual thing that is happening. And I think the timing of what we received, we've been really lucky with sales and the timing in which we have been fortunate enough to receive these funds. I think moving forward with the climate of all things and old growth timber and all things forestry, I think I've been screaming out, maybe not screaming. At home I do though. Every time that the topic comes up, that I've mentioned things like a community fund or things where legacy is the perfect word. So legacy investment fund, where we're a forestry and fishing community historically, hence that's our legacy, hence something picking away at it for things and affordable, all the things that, you know, that have been allocated for some of the funds or have been used for some of the funds thus far are not things that you can put a plaque on and you can say this is a Barclay Community Forest legacy project. I think it needs to be lasting. I think that we've been fortunate enough to get what we've got, and we may not be as fortunate in the future, and that if we could hold on to it, and it would forever give something back to the community, that would be everything that I would hope for it. So I 100% would love to see a legacy investment fund. And I'm sure nobody's surprised to hear me say that because I've mentioned this more than once. Yeah, thank you.
So you would be in favor of 100% investment into the legacy fund? or can you see yourself splitting it between that and one of the other options?
I can see some things being up for negotiating purposes down the road. I do agree that it has to be a big enough chunk. And then, of course, it could compound each year until we were ready. I understand how that works. And I'm not against, I just really, I've been saying even since the beginning, even if we just took a little bit of it and put in a community fund and people could then add to it, or a different concept, obviously, than this, but this still puts, it's still the same end game in that there's always something there that is the Barclay Community Forest Fund.
And the CBT has offered us to invest
Yes, they have,
on our
yeah.
behalf, which would be even more than just interest. Councillor Hoare?
I concur that we need to tuck some of this away so that it is there for the future. And one of the things that we have bumped up against through our term and is a lack of funds for some of the community initiatives that happen, like when we do grant and aid and we have to figure out who we can give money to. And we're a little restricted. And so I was kind of playing around with the idea, well, you know, so say you could invest $1 million and say we were getting the 5% and so we had 50K. Well, currently we put 20,000 to grant and aid. You know, if we said, okay, half of the dividends went to grants and aid, that would go a long way towards being able to fund some of those other projects that we've had to turn down over the last couple of years because we didn't have the money for it, without tapping into the general revenue stream. And then the rest goes, you know, the rest could be going to some other community, you know, maybe another community thing. Maybe it's a health center. Maybe it's seed money for something else. But I just thought that would be a nice way to, you know, help the kids, help the seniors, help the community itself from the community forest. So.
And would you see yourself committing 100% to the legacy, or dividing it between another bylaw, perhaps?
Well, I'm looking at dividing the dividends. So, like,
But of
say
this-
if it you know, there's just under $1 million. So if we put all of that away and we had the dividends to play with, then it's how you play with the dividends afterwards. Right?
Okay, so you 100% are looking at the legacy option.
Oh yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kemps?
I again support the legacy fund for sure. I would like to see $500,000 go into that legacy fund, and looking at the dividends off of that as well. I think I also agree with looking at some restricted general revenue and making a bylaw for that, and just talking out what we really need to put that restricted revenue towards. I'd also like to know from staff, how much on an average do we get from the MRDT every year for affordable housing, just so I could have it in my head, because it's a bigger picture when you're looking at money to spend. And also for RMI funds, what we normally get every year, and what the description and what we could spend that on. Just because there's a lot of other things coming up, like sidewalks, for goodness sake, sidewalks. The medical center, if that comes to anything, wayfaring signs, all that kind of thing, that I would like to see the bigger picture.
I think that's a big ask for staff at this particular time, but a report might be
Yeah,
in
report, yeah.
in order. Councillor Cole?
Only because you mentioned it, and I said community fund, and then you said the CBT. And the reason why I'm not sure the differences between a legacy investment fund and a community fund, but being the alternate for the CBT and going to the a few years already, in the beginning of our term, I went to the Canadian Community Fund Conference with the CBT in Victoria, learned a lot more about that and how some communities have turned something into a lot, and it offers the opportunity then in the future for different fundraisers or different organizations wanting to give back to the community through the fund that then grows over time beyond this initial investment or future future profits through the Barclay Community Forest, that it would actually be something that is open to other contributions and little things. Like in some places they may have a thing you scan with your phone when you launch your boat and you caught a whole bunch of fish, and maybe you want to give a fee or a donation to the Euclid Community Fund. And lots of cities have them, lots of communities have them. The CBT does it for they have different ones. They manage them, but we don't have one of our own. And I've gone down this road before, and I've talked to previous people. Dwayne, I talked to your predecessor and the predecessor before that in the short term that we've had. And I know it's really not something that typically would take place at this table, that there'd be a committee and I don't know exactly how we can sit here and say that that would be a good idea, but it seems to me like it's an enhanced version of a legacy investment fund, because it's actually open and encouraging other investment and not just this contribution. So I'm just saying that out loud, and if anybody wanted to comment on what they know or think about that.
I agree. The CBT does manage those investments for whoever is giving them money, and they do invest them just like into the stock market or into some investment that will yield more than just the bank interest rate. So that is something to take a look at. Mr. Lawrence?
Yeah, just for, it sounds like council is leaning towards a legacy fund of some sort. Things that council could consider moving forward is, and we don't need specific direction right now. Staff will bring back a follow-up report with, the details of what the legacy fund could look like. But some things that council could consider is that you could allocate or determine what that minimum balance is within the legacy fund. So, is it 500,000, million, million and a half, 5 million, whatever that is. From the Barclay Community Forest, you could consider, 50% of all dividends goes into a legacy fund until such time as you hit $5 million for the sake of argument. And then beyond that, then those funds are reconsidered by the council of the day for expending in an alternate means. There's a lot of different options for council to consider with setting that up. If it's $500,000 initial, and then having the ability for the community to contribute and build up those reserves to get greater dividends, then that's an option as well. You can reinvest the dividends for it or a portion thereof. So if there's $1 million, you spend 25,000, you reinvest 25, and you continually grow that opportunity to keep up with inflation and other opportunities. So what we can do, if this is council's direction, is to develop a policy or a basic draft policy and staff report. We'd bring that back for consideration by council as to the nuances of different opportunities and the way that we could manage those funds in a legacy investment fund of some sort.
Thank you. And so the Legacy Investment Fund would require a policy, not a bylaw. Is that correct?
I would probably suggest doing it through a bylaw. It ingrains it more into a legal terms, whereas again, a policy, it can be ignored by the council of the day when it's pressured to do so. When it's a bylaw, you would have to undo a lot of legislation to remove aspects of that legacy fund.
That's the right answer. Because when you described the difference between the bylaw and the policy, I underlined bylaw several times because I think that's really crucial to have that control over the next people sitting in these seats.
So one additional question for council is I did hear some discussion about restricted general revenue for a portion of the funds. Is that something that council wants staff to pursue? And if so, is there some specific direction as to what that might look like, so we have an idea of what we're going to bring back to council?
So just for clarification, the restricted general revenue does not require a bylaw, but the dedicated reserve funds does require a bylaw.
Yes.
Oh, so it's a dedicated.
So I would go for option C then,
Yeah.
because
The
again,
dedicated reserve.
I
Yes.
prefer a bylaw to be in
Yes.
place.
Okay.
For sure.
So, and then is there a specific, we can build a bylaw for council's consideration, but we will need eventually direction from council as to what is that fund.
Councillor Kemps?
That's where I would like to see a report where it shows an average of what we get from the MRDT funds for affordable housing every year, and also a report of what described RMI funds, what we have and what we looks like we're going to have within the next 3 years. Does that make sense, Abby?
Yeah, so I can answer one part of that for
Okay.
council. So the OAP portion of the MRDT is what we receive right now, and it's about $100,000 a year.
Okay.
That might go up or down depending on the year and the number of online booking platforms there are.
Yeah.
But it's about 100,000 a year.
Okay. Yeah.
Councillor Cole?
I think right now, in order for me to be able to commit to, okay, well, this amount of funds should be dedicated to go towards this, and this should go to the legacy. I think we have some big ticket items wagging in the wind right now without really knowing which ones are going to fly with this amount of fund at this time. And I know we're talking about, when we're talking about the big picture, and we're talking about where the funds are coming from, not the amount of funds we have right now, that it's hard to say, okay, well, right now we want to do this and this will cost this, so we'll do that. So I think I would be hesitant to
See it right.
earmark any amount right now for any particular thing until some things filter through over the next couple months.
We should be able to provide council with sort of that, with respect to the legacy fund. What's the minimum, right, that you would want to consider, and what would be a realistic maximum? Although, the more you put in, the more you get out of it, right? So there is no real theoretical maximum. Also, our Director of Finance will be bringing forward the budget on the February 3rd budget meeting. That will give a little bit more clarity to council today, or on the 3rd, as to what the projects are, what's coming up, what needs to be funded. But this will give staff a little bit to go on to start building that policy for council.
Great. Any other comments from councillors?
Yeah, no, just the more I think about it, the more I think about less than what we have putting in, and I don't disagree with the idea of splitting it and doing this portion, but I think with these other earmarked amounts for the affordable housing or towards the Amphitrite project, and a little bit here and a little bit there for feasibility study, etc., I think we've kind of spread it around enough already that we have dwindled down now to less than $1 million, and hopefully we get more. Maybe we won't. Maybe it'll never be as substantial as it has been in these last few lucky years. So I'm leaning more towards legacy to make it enough so that it makes a difference moving forward in whatever we decide depending on how things look, obviously.
Yeah.
Councillor Kemps?
I would like to see some of the reports regarding affordable housing, because if you're taking from a whole bunch of pots, I know that affordable housing is top of our list, but I agree with Councillor Cole about the legacy fund. Totally do. But I'm wondering if we start at $500,000, cap it at $1 million, put everything else we have or get into that fund, but then look at our dedicated reserve funds of what we could put under there, and it might not be affordable housing. We might be getting that from the MRDT, right? But let's just have some really good projects that we're going to put this towards.
Yeah, I think a little more detailed
Reports.
information will
Yeah.
be help us make some decisions. Councillor Hoare, any final comments?
No, but when do I not have a comment? No, I agree with Councillor Cole, but also Councillor Kemps. It's the more you can put into a legacy, the better, because you'll get more out of it. But there may be some projects, and you're right. It would be good to have that little bit more information. But that doesn't say that I wouldn't be like, okay, well, $970K, sure, let's put that away. But
We could go to Vegas and put it all in black.
We also need a legacy.
Oh, sorry.
red.
All right, we digress. Yeah, okay. Our next report is from the Director of Parks and Recreation regarding hard sports facility direction. Ms. Fortune, can you please provide a summary of your report?
Steve and I've got to watch that. All right, can you guys hear me? There we go. That's better. Okay, so as you know, this is the Committee of the Whole, so this is a starting point for this process, and I'm really looking forward to some input and feedback from you guys. But just to give you a bit of a summary, as it were, certainly what I'm looking for is looking at the type of facility, size, and potential location of a hard sports surface facility that we've been talking about for a bit, speaking of Barclay Sound Forest funds. As you well know, the Seaplane-based Recreation Hall has exceeded its lifespan, and the Community and Council have both identified the need for replacement of the Seaplane-based Rec Hall. Council has allocated $1 million from Barclay Community Forest Funds in the 2021 5-year capital plan, financial plan, with $50K going towards the preliminary design work for a facility. So when we were looking at completing a preliminary research into what might best suit the programming facility needs to the hard sports surface facility, we looked at Seaplane-based Recreation Hall and what it does currently do. It's currently an undersized basketball court with washrooms and storage, as I think you're all well aware. Considerations that were ultimately explored for any type of hard sports facility looked at programming opportunities, operational costs, and other uses such as muster stations or shared resources with an organization such as the food bank, for example. A covered hard sports service meets several requirements in terms of the replacement of the Seaplane-based Recreational Hall, and additionally some of the key considerations would be storage, washroom facilities, and in consideration with the overall design. So saying that, I looked into pros and cons. And let's see if I can make this work. And what you've got in front of you is the hard sports surface concept design that Tofino is looking at right at the moment. Okay, Paul, what did I do? Don't touch anything. Back away. I thought that's what I did. That's what I did. Or not. Would you please? So if we can look at types of facilities. Nope, I definitely cannot read that from here. So I'll be looking down when I read here a little bit. So generally we looked at 3 types of sports facilities. We looked at a fully enclosed building, a covered sports surface, which is similar to what I showed from the Tofino Pavilion, and an open sports surface, which is something like an open lacrosse box, just to give you a bit of a frame of reference. Do you guys want me to go through the pros and cons? Nope. Fair enough.
I think we've all read the report.
You've already, I don't. So just highlighting some of the things there. Timing is a big thing. Approximate cost for the facility, and as you notice with something like a fully enclosed building, I put $5 million plus because it can go any size and any amount along on that end of things. And just again And those are any questions on that slide? And I base the operating costs on sort of the cost of the UCC and the rec hall right now, with a little bit of percentage on going up from that. And so if there's no questions on that, Paula, can you move to the next one, please? So size is certainly a consideration. My concern with the rec hall is it is an undersized facility, and when you're building, especially if we're doing a new facility, we do want to build the correct sizing. Something like my recommendation is what you guys see in front of you is a full collegiate basketball court with where you can actually line paint over top, so you'll have 2 volleyball courts side by side and then a collegiate basketball court as the full length, with of course some room on the end. Any questions on that one? All right. And then once we determine sort of, Paul, can you go to the next one, please? Once we determine, and this is possibly a no-brainer, but once we determine facility and size, we need to look at location, but I would recommend that we consider the facility and size first, and then look at location, but certainly Tugwell Fields is one of the obvious ones that we have been looking at. The UCC, although nice to have as a central hub, we're tight on space. And then the rec hall is a seaplane-based road. Location's not central, it's a bit of a flood zone. Not necessarily the ideal location, but something to look at. So that's what I've got in front of you. So with that in mind, certainly would love to hear any comments or questions and some direction as to where I might be able to bring back a full report looking at the specific areas, and then that allows us to RFP and go into design detail for a hard sports surface facility. Any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Fortune.
Thank you.
Why don't we start with the type of facility?
Sure.
The full enclosed, the covered sports surface, or an open sports surface?
Unequivocally A.
I agree, fully enclosed.
That would be my opinion as well. Councillor Hoare?
Ditto.
Okay.
And can I tell you why I say that?
Yeah.
Because it'll, I'm just concerned if we lose the rec hall.
Yeah.
And eventually the poor UAC hall. So it's going to be a very sad day. But I think we have to look at what we're losing from those and what we do in the rec hall and the UAC hall right now as well, right? There's floor hockey and there's, and with their, yeah. I totally agree with fully enclosed.
Plus, we have weather here.
We do?
we have sideways rain. And the other good thing about a fully enclosed building is it could be a center for relief in case of a tsunami or some such disaster, depending on where it is. That's right.
And a Yuki Days dance.
We could move Yuki Days to Tugwell Fields.
We could.
We've gone down that road before. It did not go well. All right, so that's question number 1.
Okay.
And then as far as the size goes, what are people thinking? The rec hall size, the single court with volleyball, or the larger one?
C. When in doubt, answer C.
That's it, yeah.
I'm okay with B, actually.
B would be a minimum to me, but you know, at that point, if you're building it and it's not that much more to have that little bit of extra space, you know, the storage thing, the washroom facilities, like you are going to end up having to build, if it's fully enclosed, it's going to have to be bigger than the collegiate basketball court. And
Yeah.
I've played on those volleyball courts and basketball courts. They're fine with the cross lines.
Go
If I
big or go
may-
home.
You could even
Yeah.
close it off to be 2 units.
Yeah.
It's a
Ms. Fortune?
no-brainer.
Yeah, if I may, if you're going down that route, I would certainly the single court with the volleyball would be more of a enclosed roofed area. But if you're looking at a fully enclosed facility, I think you would go down that road with exploring that. But there is costs, obviously.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
We just have to look at our population. We're gaining in population.
Yep.
Popularity. Lots of kids.
Lots of kids.
Lots of kids.
Lots of kids.
So we're all agreed then on the larger option.
Yes.
Okay.
This is going swimmingly.
We'll wait till this one.
Oh.
Sure.
Okay, location. And I would like to note Tugwell Fields, under cons you've said location is not central, but once Weyerhaeuser builds out and Ani builds out, it actually will be kind of central.
Agreed. In fact, when I did the original report, I put at this time, but didn't want to make it confusing. So yes, it is as the community builds out, it probably more than likely would be more centrally located. Yes.
The OCP says so.
Well, in that case,
Councillor Kemps?
I just have, I'm going to D only because with Tugwell Fields, this is my concern with Tugwell,
okay.
is parking. Because if we just throw everything, we are a growing population.
Yes.
Euclid is growing out, and so already,
Yes.
if we have a soccer game, anything, I don't see the room for baseball, soccer fields, and a hard sports facility up
Yeah.
there, and everything all in one, and a lot of we need a lot of parking.
So that is a section that we would have to, storage, field house, parking are things that we would have to definitely explore. There's other options when we look at, think beyond the space that is the parking lot currently. Certainly, as the Director of Parks and Recreation, I don't want to see the field that we currently have reduced, but by the same token, we've got some space behind. We also have the Memorial Park right now, so there's some areas to look and explore further.
Yeah, that's why I always go to D, because I'm just concerned if we're going to have, and I understand it's in the tsunami-free zone, and that's the only reason why I think the rec hall, because it's got all that space. However, I just don't want to see everything put into one area. I really think we have to expand, and is there any other area that we could put a hard sports facility?
And that's something I certainly could explore. I will say, as sort of a counterpoint, it is really nice to have things centrally located. What we've done here is we have the skateboard park, we have the basketball court, we have the UCC, we have Big Beach. It's all centrally located.
I agree.
Which has a nice way of
Community
doing that.
feel, yeah,
Community
I do.
feel.
We need a lot of parking.
And if we do a similar area to that at Tugwell, I think again it creates some really positive synergy
It
and
does.
pull in the food bank and
Yeah.
So I think there's some really positive synergy of having hubs,
Yeah, totally agree.
which I would, but certainly, and we do have limited overall for the district of Euclid. We do have limited options
I know.
available, and so that is something we do have to genuinely look at quite hard.
Yeah.
But certainly it's something we could look at further in terms of parking and space and that end of things. I'd be more than happy to bring
And
back.
that's the only reason why I say D, is
Yeah,
because I'm
fair
just
enough.
really concerned of putting something else up there and not having that.
And I think that's a legitimate concern. We also do remember we have the backside. There's some other property up in that area as well that we might have the opportunity to look at or at least explore. And so that's something I can bring back to council.
And there would be a way to arrange the activities so not everything is happening on the exact same day or the exact same night.
Obviously.
I believe you could do that.
I think I can.
I believe you can't do that with a tsunami event, though, if it is a hub and a safe zone.
Well, and yeah. Yeah.
Right?
And these are things we can explore and look at, but I do, as we know, the Tugwell Fields is a muster station currently, and it is a good location along that end of things as well.
Okay, any other closing comments from council?
You have nothing to say?
Councillor Cole.
So my go-to when I looked at that was Tugwell Fields, because I get that it's nice to have things centralized here. I think at some point you need to diversify and spread things out, because we will have more community outlying and not just all old community here. There will be stuff over there. Also, I'm not ready to see the rec hall go, Seaplane Base Road, I don't know. And then other is just such a broad topic that, but I agree that if we could keep everything at Tugwell and not have to give anything up and still have enough parking and space to add that big thing we want to add there, that 10 to 13, 500 square foot unit, and enough parking to actually service that and service everything else that's already there, that would be great. And I don't know how much other space there is there.
Yeah, and it's certainly something we can further explore. There certainly would be to go that size and fully enclosed. There's a higher cost and a longer time, and certainly one of the other final questions I did ask for council's input was public engagement. So I think when we're going to that level, we probably would want to do some further public engagement. We've done an initial brush at this.
More is better.
As you all well know.
More is better, we know.
An open house or something
Yeah,
like that.
along
Yeah.
that
Online
line.
surveys, what
Yep.
people want, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. No further comments? All right. Thank you, Ms. Fortune.
Thank you.
This brings us to the end of the Committee of the Whole portion of the meeting. May I have a motion that the Committee of the Whole portion of the meeting be adjourned at 4:52 p.m. to return to the regular meeting?
I'll move adjournment.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Carried. All right, we're in the bylaw section now. We have 3 bylaw items today because there was one late item. The first one is the Euclid Official Community Plan Bylaw number 1236/2020. This report prepared by the Director of Community Planning is regarding Euclid Official Community Plan Bylaw number 1236/2020. Mr. Gregg, may I invite you to present a brief summary of this report?
Thank you, through the acting mayor. Just very briefly, that there's quite a bit of background to the OCP. Public hearings were held May 13th, and again most recently on January 20th. And I note with the correspondence and the speaker earlier that essentially that puts us in a position where, having held a public hearing, council is really in the position of considering what has been heard from the public through all the submissions. And certainly, as procedurally, unless council wanted to hold another public hearing, shouldn't be taking more input now that opportunity has passed. However, it's really up to council how the process goes. But having held that public hearing last week, council really now could essentially discuss what was heard and consider giving the bylaw third reading and adoption at this time. And if there are any questions, that I can certainly, staff can attempt to answer them for council if there's anything outstanding. I would note in the report that we are recommending a couple of edits, that these are not of substance or consequence that would require another public hearing, that specifically that correcting the spelling to the preferred spelling of the Toquat Nation. And it's a bit frustrating that in an earlier version of the document, we caught those edits and made them, and somehow they crept back in. So we're suggesting that it be edited to make sure that we have the preferred spelling. And as well, there's the wording of one in the description under heritage and culture that was suggested as well, that would have sort of the proper wording of describing the location and the existence of cultural sites in the district. Other than that, I'd suggest if there are any questions from council, we can attempt to answer them. Otherwise, it would be sort of a discussion of the public hearing results.
Are there any questions from councillors? Councillor Hoare?
I am curious, and I don't know if you have the answer to this, Mr. Gregg, but somebody brought up the percentage of park land within the district's boundaries. And so I'm wondering if we know what percentage of parks fall within, because there was a lot of discussion about green space in parks.
Certainly, and I can't. To give you a number would be a bit of comparing apples and oranges. That what is shown under parks and open space in the OCP includes what is dedicated parkland. It also includes, and even in our old, the Parks and Rec Master Plan, some of the green space designation indicates like the school district playing fields, which effectively act as publicly owned land, but it's not municipal parkland either. Also within, if you wish I could bring up examples on the screen of the OCP showing like all the land around the lighthouse and the Outer Amphitrite Point is on one map shown as green. It's parks and open space. But in the land use plan, it's also recognizing that part of the designation there is public institutional because it's owned by the Coast Guard. The forest that's there is open space. We don't expect any change to it, and most people would assume it's all part of the parkland that's out there. However, that is really a navigation function as well, and there's underground antennas there that are part of high frequency communications, and so there's the designation of parks and open space includes everything, including municipal owned and dedicated parkland, but also other public lands, or even in our mapping includes private lands that may be essentially conservation lands that are privately owned, but either with or without some agreements to hold them. So if council wishes, we can certainly bring back a report and some detail on how many acres of dedicated parkland we have versus those other sorts. To compare the percentage with other communities I think we'd be throwing out a bit of apples and oranges. I'd say what's significant in the OCP Schedule A and Schedule C, the Parks and Trails Network map, is the amount of potential parks and open space going forward over the length of the plan with the further sort of development and build out of the community is showing a pretty substantial increase over what's there today. I don't know if that helps. It's a bit of a non-answer to the percentage question, but
yeah. No, that's fine. I don't necessarily need a full report with an actual percentage. It's more an understanding of the way that green space, the way that we think of green space. And I know that why have I suddenly forgotten his name? Who was talking about it? The 30%, the federal thing about 30% parkland by 2030, which is only 8 years away, which is really not that far. So that was why it was kind of a curiosity factor for me. But the other thing that was brought up that I just want to clarify, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but some of those green spaces are also informed by that flood risk mapping that we did. So they're actually spaces that couldn't be safely developed. Is that correct?
correct. And I'm just pulling up a map here to have hopefully a little better answer here. If I can find. Okay, my pointer's now magic. So earlier I mentioned this. This is the land use plan, Schedule A. So this is the piece of Coast Guard land that I was referring to, which is shown as institutional because it's not municipal parkland. However, on the Parks and Open Space plan, it shows all of that as green because it effectively is open space. For example, yes, what's shown in the land use plan, I'm going to move over some of the changes, say along Weyerhaeuser's land. Some of these areas where the green that is shown along the shoreline is a little expanded over what had been shown on the previously in the OCP or in the MDA, and that is reflecting better mapping of what are stream corridors and also the mapping of tsunami flood hazard areas, where if there's areas that are shown as high hazard where they're essentially for new subdivisions and creation of new lots, the guidance from the province is to avoid development in those areas. So it's shown as green on these maps. That doesn't mean it would all be dedicated necessarily as parkland, as part of a rezoning, say, or subdivision. Some of it may still be, maybe privately owned, but having conservation covenants, or it may just be part of the green space of, say, a hotel site one day, for example, in that sort of location. So that green is not intending that 100% of that will all end up as parkland. There's definitely flexibility as the other processes go forward. But this land use plan and the parks and trails map as well in the OCP were definitely informed by that better mapping of those areas that are subject to flooding, or where there are areas of particular environmental values as well.
Councillor Kemps?
Just to piggyback onto that, what you just said. So the islands off Euclid there. So that is in the long-range land use plan map. That doesn't change the zoning of what they are zoned for. Is that correct?
That is correct. The adoption of the OCP bylaw does not change the zoning of any property in Euclid. That's a separate bylaw. This is showing broad, long-range plan of how, if, say, individual property owners were coming forward and applying to rezone their property, what the intention that the community is essentially looking for over that long-range plan. It does not modify the zoning of any properties.
Any other comments or questions from councillors? I see there are some recommendations.
I am happy to move those.
Okay. Councillor Hoare.
I will move that council move. Okay. Sorry. I want to edit that. Option A to 1, amend the District of Euclid Official Community Plan Bylaw number 1236/2020 to incorporate the edits as presented in draft 7.4 as described in the staff report dated January 25th, 2022. I think we should do these separately.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Carried.
I will move that council give the District of Euclid Official Community Plan Bylaw number 1236/2020 third reading as amended.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Carried.
And I will move to adopt District of Euclid Official Community Plan Bylaw number 1236/2020.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Pop the champagne, Mr. Gregg.
Less exciting sound than before.
That's as close to a champagne cork we're going to get.
It
Binder clip.
sounded a bit like a champagne cork. Congratulations. And thank you to the planning department for all the hard work on this over the past few years. It's been amazing.
Thank you. This is a team effort. You know, it wasn't one that was done by an arm's length consultant to do a lot of the writing. So I had a lot of help and support, both in the writing and compiling the document, but also just there are a number of people who, I personally have been coming out to the West Coast my entire life. A piece of the OCP is a bit of writing what the community is about and sort of reflecting it back at itself, but I've only been living here a little over 4 years, and so relying on some of the voices of people who've been living here and their experiences who've been here for many years was really important. And so I had a lot of input from some of the staff, from Ms. Fortune, Mr. Cannon, Wanda, and a lot of the staff in various departments who've seen the community evolve have really had a lot of influence, and my job is just to listen and try and pull it all together. And I would be absolutely remiss if I didn't mention John Toogood specifically, who has in many cases is my antenna when it comes to planning matters and land use, and has really been done an enormous amount of work on this. So he deserves full credit. So it's very much a team effort. So I'm pleased to accept the thanks on their behalf.
Yes, and please give Mr. Toogood our thanks as well. Okay, moving on to the next bylaw, zoning amendment bylaw number 1299-312, Passive Milford Place. This report, also prepared by the Director of Community Planning, is regarding zoning amendment bylaw number 1299-312, Passive Milford Place. Mr. Gregg.
Through the chair, very, very briefly, this council has held a public hearing on this bylaw, and having done so, council couldn't really now discuss what was heard. There was not a lot of input at the public hearing, but council is basically in a position to consider what was heard on the bylaw 1299 and consider giving the bylaw third reading and adoption. I would just note that often with zoning amendments, sometimes there are covenants or conditions that need to be met between third reading and adoption, and none of those have arisen as part of this to this point. So that's that would just explain why it's being put forward, as council could do both at this point. And unless there are any questions, it's really in council's hands.
Thank you. Does council have any questions or comments? Okay, there are a couple of recommendations.
I'll move those. I'll move that council move option A to 1, give zoning amendment bylaw number 1299, 2021, third reading. And 2, adopt zoning amendment bylaw number 1299, 2021.
That was a second,
Yeah,
Councillor
that was
Cool.
a second.
And all in favor? Any opposed? And carried. And we have one more bylaw. This was a late item. The borrowing bylaw number 1301, 2022.
Good afternoon. So on January 11th of this year, Council gave this bylaw for second and third reading. The bylaw is seeking authorization for the district to borrow the maximum as permitted in Section 177, subsection 3 of the Community Charter to ensure access to funds for cash flow purposes should the need arise. Any funds borrowed under this authorization will be repaid when revenue from property tax is collected. So the recommendation today is that Council consider adopting Revenue Anticipation Borrowing Bylaw number 1301, 2022 as presented. Can I answer any questions?
Thank you, Paula. Does anyone have a question?
No. I'll move it.
Okay.
I'll move that council approve adoption option A to adopt District of Euclid Revenue Anticipation Borrowing Bylaw number 1301, 2022 as presented.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Any opposed? And carried. Okay, we're moving into reports. There are 2 reports today. The first is the Euclid Health Center Initiative. Mr. Lawrence, our CAO, will report on that.
Thank you. Before council is a request for consideration to approach the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Hospital, Alberni-Clayoquot Regional Hospital District to consider taking over and developing a Euclid Health Center, obviously in Euclid. Council and staff have been working towards developing a health center for the community to consolidate our various health services in a more suitable location and a more suitable building. This project is a slow meander, and there's a significant cost that would be incurred by the district if we were to undertake it ourselves. Although it's not a traditional service area that the community undertakes, it is something that council can choose to provide for the community as a service that we would like to pursue. What we are suggesting, though, is that we approach and advocate to the ACRHD to consider taking over this project. Now, there are a number of benefits to do that, to pursue this. It will free up borrowing capacity and funding reserve capacity for other priority projects of council. It divests the building that would be purchased by the municipality and all the related costs of operating and maintaining that facility moving forward into the near future. It also alleviates some of the risk associated with owning and operating a building and then leasing it to health service providers. Although there has been significant interest in the community's health services, there's no guarantee that from one year to the next that they'll all be here. It's been identified that the Island Health is very interested in consolidating their services into a portion of a new building that would be renovated or built. And that would be a long-term lease. With respect to other services, other professionals that provide health services, you might be able to get a longer-term lease, but you might not. You might have a shorter-term lease, which would mean that the district would be responsible for any revenue shortfalls that would be associated with paying off the debt associated with developing this new facility. The downsides to relinquishing control would be is that we're relinquishing control. Council would have a little bit less input. We do have a council member on the regional district that would be able to advocate for and participate in those discussions as they move forward. But it will no longer be a municipal project. It would be an ACRHD project. They would be determining how this project moves forward. The pace of the project would be determined by that organization. We would need to advocate and facilitate that ongoing process to move it along. There is always an option that we say, it doesn't work out for the HD, and we want to bring it back within the district's wheelhouse. So there's always that ability to shift if needed at that time. But this does alleviate a lot of the challenges that we're facing with funding of multiple costly projects that are coming before council. One example would be pursuing an enclosed recreation facility. $5 million is at the low end. There's a lot of $1 million projects out there right now, and I know our director of finance is going, how are we going to pay for all of this, and in what century? So this does free up some resources from the municipality with very little risk to the municipality. If the ACRHD decides, no, we don't want anything to do with it, if you want to move this forward, it's your project, then it would just come back before council and we would continue on the path to develop the health center. The downside would be that there would be a delay between that advocating for the ACRHD to pursue it and the time that it comes back.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Councillor Cole, you sit on that committee. What is your feeling for how that vote might go at the hospital?
So the same people that sit on that board sit on the board of the ACRD that were very supportive when and was very grateful for their support on that level.
Just to clarify, that's when we were looking at a building and they were willing to put some money toward it.
Yes, and we had Island Health on board and everybody, and so we went and said, will you please? And they said, yes, we support that. And so going back and saying, well, now we have this idea, and I'm happy to obviously advocate for everything that we need. I read the Hospital Act, under the Act, what hospital means and all that, and I don't know what's already under that Act where we sort of sit in conjunction with what Island Health was willing to do and just how all those pieces of the puzzle fit together. I don't think that's for me to really sort out, but other than just to represent and at that table. And of course the West Coast Committee, which I sit on, it would go through there I think that's the beginning of March is the next one. And then it would go from there to the ACRD to then bring to the hospital committee, a hospital district, regional districts of hospitals meeting they usually fall on the same day. That would be after the March one, so that would be on the 9th of March is the first that it would come to that level. So I'm happy to work with staff and have as much information and do as much supporting and advocating for us as we can. It feels a bit awkward because I already went and said, this is what we're going to do, and we have this support, and we're going to run with this, and we're going to do this and that, and obviously we've had some things that we thought might happen that didn't happen, and so it's not a tail between the legs thing. It just kind of feels like here I am again, but it's all good. I'm happy to do whatever it takes.
To know what we'll try it.
Sure, 100%.
Any other comments or questions from council?
No, I just think we might as well try it.
Okay, we have a recommendation before us.
That council approve option A to enter into discussions with the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional Hospital District to consolidate Euclid's health services into a single health facility within the district of Euclid.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you, Mr. Lawrence, for that report. And the second report is the final report, the 2021 West Coast Housing Needs Assessment. This is provided by the Director of Community Planning. Mr. Gregg, may I invite you to present a summary of this report?
Through the chair, just very briefly, I'm pleased that this has come. This project has come to this point with the help of Macola Development Services. Sandy McKay is on the line here and on screen, and Turner Drake. I've got to say, we had a call earlier this week where they were helping essentially with the capacity building, the training staff from ourselves and some of our indigenous neighboring communities, and with Tofino and the regional district, on essentially where all the data is, how it lives, how it builds into this data tool, so that we can update this in the future without, if we don't have a consultant involved, or if we don't have funding for hiring consultants, this is going to be a repeated thing. The consensus, I think, around the Zoom table on that was that this has been a great consulting group to work with, and that there's generally a lot of appreciation for the report and the amount of public engagement and comment that has gone into it. We do have, I think, 228 pages of your agenda, includes the appendices and all the community comments that came in, and it certainly paints a very clear picture of some of the challenges we have with housing right now. So this is, I think, going to be a great tool for us going forward. Other than that, I'm just here to introduce the topic, and that Mr. McKay, I think, will give a little overview of the report and the findings.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. Welcome, Mr. McKay.
Thanks, Bruce. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for having me tonight. It's really a privilege to be here presenting to you. Unfortunately, not there in person, but hopefully we can change that at some point before this project is over in the next few weeks. Thanks for that introduction, Bruce. That's a really good introduction to the project, and very glad to be reporting back to you with the final findings of the West Coast Housing Need and Demand Study, specifically the District of Euclid Housing Needs Report. So I'm just going to share my screen. And if maybe you could just give me a thumbs up or a nod. Actually, you know what? I can actually see it on the screen reflected behind you, so that's perfect. So as Bruce said, my name is Sandy Mackey. I'm the Housing Research and Policy Lead at Macola Development Services. Ourselves, along with Turner Drake and Partners Limited, conducted the Housing Needs Report on behalf of the District of Euclid and its partner communities in this project, the District of Tofino, Euclid Nation, or the Euclid Government, Telus First Nation, Toquat Nation, and the ACRD Region C. So a really strong group of committed municipalities, First Nations, and regional district representatives who all had are facing a lot of similar problems and looking at collaborative solutions. So that for us was a really exciting opportunity, and we're very appreciative of the staff response and some of the work that went in on behalf of not only us, but your staff and community partners as well. So I know that Bruce said you have 226 pages, but I promise that you don't have to read all of that. I think reading all of those pages is a little bit too much. So I'll just give you a really brief outline on what you can actually see in your report. So the first thing is the regional summary and introduction. That's a high-level summary of all of the findings from the data and engagement across that West Coast region. It's an executive summary, and it's got a lot of sort of primer on the role of local government and the responsibilities local government has when providing housing for its community members or looking at legislation and things like that. It's broad, so it is for the entire West Coast, but it's where I would recommend starting. Certainly the first 10 pages of that report would give you a great overall look at what our entire project was like. Then maybe the more important piece for you is the Euclid Housing Needs Report, which contains key findings, recommendations, and is largely data-driven, but focused entirely on the District of Euclid. That's where you can go for greater detail and some of that more localized data. As well, all of the reports and engagement pieces in that specific Euclid report come from the District of Euclid. And then if you want to go even deeper, you can take a look at some of the appendices that are included. The full engagement report, which has, I think, almost 40 pages or something like that, 25 to 40 pages of actual community engagement feedback, which is a really powerful read if you wanted to look at that. There's a community infographic that contains a lot of the findings in easy to understand sort of graphic formats. There's monitoring tools and planning tools, which are mostly going to be used by your staff. And at the very end, there are data tables and provincial summaries, which are about checking boxes for the province to ensure that you're meeting all requirements of the new legislation that was passed in 2019. And before I get going on some of the findings, I'll just run through a couple of the key data limitations that we came across in this report. The West Coast is a really challenging data environment. You've got a lot of smaller geographies. You've got highly seasonal populations, which aren't cataloged by census data very well. You're seeing a lot of rapid changes, as evidenced by some of the housing market data that we're going to talk about in a couple of minutes, all of which makes it difficult to catalog need in your communities. But quantitative data isn't everything. We received a tremendous engagement response through this project, combining Area C, Tofino, and Euclid. I think there were almost 700 engagements with the different things that we were conducting, which really goes to show the passion people have for housing issues in their community and how important some of those issues are to your community members. When we combine those West Coast geographies, it actually does stabilize some of the data indicators, which really helps us. And all of these things are passed through sort of three different lenses. We look at data, engagement, and professional experience from both us and the staff that worked with us before we make any key findings or things like that. So though the data is not perfect, we feel like we're getting at the truth of your community as best we can through those different mechanisms. Briefly, the census data from 2021, the first pass at that is actually coming out in a couple of weeks. So some of the pieces here will be updated very quickly. Others we won't have until 2023. The things that are updated in the next couple of weeks, we're going to make a point of returning to some of our data and giving your staff a couple of the more up-to-date pieces if and when we have them. So where I'll start is looking at population and households. Between 2006 and 2026, your population increased by quite a lot, from about 1,500 to 2,200 people. A lot of that growth is actually centered in a couple of key age demographics. The senior population almost doubled between 2006 and 2016 to be between 2016 and our projection for 2026. We're expecting it to make up about 18% of the total population. However, anecdotally, we've received a lot of information that there's a ton of demand from younger families. Lots of kids are moving to Euclid, as we heard earlier in tonight's council meeting. So what our expectations are is that even though you're seeing maybe some of the folks in those younger age demographics, we don't expect that seniors will decrease accordingly. So it might just be that there is more growth than we're expecting. And luckily, this is one of the pieces that will come back to us in the census relatively quickly. So we should be able to up-to-date this graph to account for 2021 data points over the next couple of weeks here. So those older residents are largely worried about some of the key issues that they're looking at as they're getting older in their community. They're worried about their ability to maintain larger properties. They're worried about their ability to downsize because of cost and availability. And for us, that highlights the need for affordable and accessible housing, particularly rental options for seniors and elders on fixed incomes. home care and semi-supported or supported housing options, as well as housing that remains close or is built closer to amenities and services. Some of the things that you can do to promote those uses are looking at land use decisions that prioritize types of multi-unit housing, whether those are senior clusters or small apartment complexes, duplexes, triplexes. In many cases, smaller units are more appropriate for this age demographic, though not necessarily less bedrooms. Most of the seniors and elders that we spoke to still liked having that additional bedroom or an additional 2 bedrooms to ensure that their family are able to visit and they have space for storage and things like that. What they're looking for is maybe a property that is easier to maintain, where they don't have to, mow the lawn or shovel the snow when it comes, or those sorts of things. And collective decisions around regional land use will be really important for that. Renting was the other key issue that emerged in our study. Rental housing is probably the most, was the thing that came up the most in engagement efforts. Rental housing is hard to find. It's more expensive, and it is more likely to be in poor condition in the District of Euclid. Renters are also less likely to be able to meet their housing needs than owners, which is largely a product of the income available to renters versus the income available to owners. Renter household median incomes are about $45,000 a year, and the median owner household earns about $72,000 per year. In our survey, 49% of all renter respondents indicated their current housing costs were not affordable to them. And looking at some of the Statistics Canada metrics that we have, 38% of renters are in what's called core housing need, which means that either their home is unaffordable, it is too small for the number of people in their household, or it's in need of major repairs. And this quote here I'll read just because it is so exemplary of what we saw. This is a person who was raised in Euclid and has found themselves and their family almost homeless twice over the past 3 years due to lack of available housing. It's frustrating and sad for the families who have lived here longer than anyone to be left in this situation. I feel like I'm constantly on edge knowing my landlord can sell any minute or make a vacation rental. So that all the time, the sort of mental health and constant struggle and worry about your housing situation, about your stability of housing, really taking its toll on people. So again, this highlights a need for, similar to an older population, dedicated, affordable, and appropriate rental options. As well, housing for workers in key industries, especially in those tourism and hospitality sectors where incomes tend to be lower or more seasonal. And then housing for families and individuals. So it's not just, one-bedroom rental units that people are looking for. There are families who are looking at 3-bedroom properties or looking at the ownership market and realizing that if they want to remain in Euclid, they're going to be long-term renters and they need 3 bedrooms to enable that as a renter. So some of the things that you can do as a council, many of these things have been brought to you before by Bruce, which is great. Looking at encouraging denser and multifamily options where appropriate. You can look at things like rental zoning or even pre-zoning. So if there are properties that you would like to see be used for rental in perpetuity, you can pre-zone them for rental even before a structure is built. You can continue to review and further relax accessory dwelling unit restrictions where appropriate, and you can further regulate short-term rentals to ensure that the smaller units that are available in your community are used for long-term rental options. And then the last key piece that I'll touch on here is cost of ownership. We've gone through this before, so I won't belabor the point with this graph. But in general, housing in Euclid has really gone up dramatically. It's increased more than 100% over the past 10 years since 2011. And that's adjusted for inflation. That's driven by your single detached market, which has gone up 84% to well over $600,000 for a median home. And all housing types have gone up as well. So it's not just, single detached, it's your row house options when you see them and your semi-detached or duplex options. But, that doesn't mean quite as much as these are just numbers, and there's many ways where your housing prices going up are not necessarily a bad thing. So what we've done with this next graph is we've actually mapped the purchasing power of the median income against the cost of the median house year over year. So that orange line represents the mortgage or the cost that someone earning the median income in your community would be able to afford, given some reasonable assumptions about mortgage eligibility. And the blue is the cost of the median home. You can really see that until about 2017, those lines matched pretty well, which is really interesting and goes back to some of Euclid's sort of reputation as a more affordable alternative on the West Coast. But about 5 years ago, they diverged, and they've continued to diverge, and we expect in 2021 that they will diverge even further, as it's going to be the most expensive year probably ever across British Columbia. So, though the housing prices are going up, incomes are not going up accordingly, and there are many people who are now in a rental position that are seeing housing affordability and certainly housing ownership be something that they're not capable of achieving. So it's renters and it's owners, but in both cases, rates of insecurity are much higher for single-income households, lone parents, seniors or elders, and young people. So anyone with sort of an added complication in their financial situation is, compounds their housing insecurity and risk of housing insecurity. Owners are worried about maintenance, cost of utilities, ability to age. Many worry that they'll have to leave their communities as they get older. Renters, it's cost and stability over and over again. And it's fairly difficult to save in the current rental market. So it's more people renting more expensive units for longer in order to save for a down payment, if they can ever get that far. And it is really impacting people's ability to stay and grow their family on the West Coast. All of this is compounded by the cost of construction. It's incredibly difficult to build new. It's even more difficult to build new affordable options. Private development and extending services can be really expensive. And even if we were able to bring a number of new private market housing options to the market, it's unlikely that those would alleviate significant affordability pressures. And in general, space is limited, right? You just can't build your way out of it anymore. And so, you're dealing with a lot of challenges, I think, over the next 10 or 15 years as you look to address these issues. And this quote I've highlighted because it is so relevant. I have to move soon, and there are zero options for me and my family. My children are thriving in this community, and we will likely have to leave due to a lack of affordable housing. This is not the only quote where that sentiment was given to us. It happened over and over again across both Euclid and Tofino, and in some cases even in Area C and our Indigenous communities. So the real sort of step forward, and what we see as a real missing piece in your market is actually non-market housing. Typically, these are, again, dedicated, affordable, and appropriate rental options. Often they embrace affordable tenure models. Some things that came up in our study were senior clusters and co-ops. But this non-market housing is typically housing that is affordable and affordable in perpetuity. Often it's called secured affordable housing. It's typically funded through support from senior governments, and it is operated almost always by a nonprofit housing provider. The Tofino Housing Corporation is a great example of a nonprofit or a non-market housing provider and operator, though I think they're just developing and providing the houses right now, and they've actually partnered with someone else to operate them. So some of the ways you can increase the stock of non-market housing, which is the housing that's critical for meeting those people stuck between that median income line and that ownership line. First and foremost, I mean, you can directly fund it. That's one way to do it, and that's what Tofino is doing through the THC. You can also look at regional partnerships with other municipalities and First Nations governments, some of which have been proposed and are starting in earnest to be coming to the forefront now. And you can explore formal collaborations with those organizations and municipalities in the regional district through something called a regional housing service, where the regional district actually implements a tax or for a service that is related to housing. That's what has been done in the Comox Valley and in the Cowichan Valley as well. So there's precedent for it on Vancouver Island. But some of those important things you can do are more indirect. You can educate your community to reduce stigma around affordable uses. So if and when you are able to have the opportunity to put an affordable use in your community, it's much easier to do so, and there's less pushback from some community members who may see it as impacting their property values or not a desired use in their neighborhood. And you can even help with things like a land acquisition and disposal strategy. So identifying now which properties you think would be best for affordable housing, moving to either acquire those properties or zone them appropriately for that use. And if you do acquire them, disposing of them to organizations that are committed to offering units at a secured and affordable rate. So that's it for us. The next steps for this project, the legislation does require that you receive the report by resolution and publish it online, which is great. It means everyone in your community can read this report for themselves. And that's why we have so many different ways of reading it, because we know not everyone has the time to read all 227 pages. We've done, as Bruce said, that staff capacity building, which was a really great opportunity for us to share some of the knowledge we gained in this report and actually some of the tools that we used to prepare it with your staff. And lastly, we'll hopefully be holding a public information session, likely in February. We'll give you the details when we have it, and we'll make sure that it's widely available and advertised. And if you would like to attend that, absolutely, you'd be welcome to. And of course, thank you to all of the stakeholders who helped us with this project. It's been incredible. Broad sector support for the work that we were doing, and a ton of people gave a lot of their time to this project. And a special thanks to those of you on Euclid Council who were able to participate in multiple meetings and sessions, and of course to Bruce and the staff at the Euclid Community Center who worked with us to enable a couple of different days of sessions at that incredible facility. So thanks very much, everyone. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And if not, I'll kick it back to you.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. Does council have any questions for Mr. McKay? I do have one. I noticed when you discussed the collaboration between all the entities, Heshquat and Ahouset were not part of this study. Is that because they are offshore?
You know, I'm not sure why they weren't included in the initial study. The funding is only available to treaty nations, and Telus decided to actually invest their own cash in partnering on this project. So that was maybe part of the reason. It could be that they were a part of another ACRD project and doing them through that one. I will say that they were invited to the meeting that happened in early December, where people were talking about establishing a regional collaborative working group for housing. So I think that though they are not part of this study, they are definitely a part of the broader conversations around housing that are happening across the West Coast.
Great, thank you. I wondered why Telus were mentioned in there, but that's because they've contributed their own money toward it. Thank you. No other questions? Well, thank you for all your hard work on this. It's much appreciated. Some really eye-opening facts, and looking for ways forward.
Perfect. Thank you.
We're at the point for notice of motion. Does anyone have a motion? No. Okay, correspondence. We have 10 correspondence items. I'm just going to go through them one by one because there's some really interesting ones in here. So let me get my binder under control here. Right, 13.1, Guiding Lights Across BC. This is from the Girl Guides of Canada, looking to, once again, we have done this for them once before, light up our junction sign in blue lights.
I would like to make a motion that we put the blue lights up on our sign, and that kind of, I know we're going to go.
We'll get to that one. All right. Councillor Kemps has made a motion.
I will second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? And carried. Update from DFO on aquaculture initiatives, area-based aquaculture management information, finfish license consultation. I did notice that there is an online workshop available in early March. If anyone is interested to attend, they have not finalized dates yet, so I'm sure they'll keep us apprised. Anyone else want to speak to that one? Okay, 13.3, AVICC third call for resolutions and nominations for the AVICC executive. Their deadline is January 28th, so tonight would be our only opportunity to put something forward if you're interested. Anyone want to put a motion forward? No. Okay. Moving on, 13.4, BC Hydro Community Re-Greening Program. This was interesting. there's money, and the deadline is January 31st. Again, not very much notice. So just maybe putting it over to staff if there is an appetite to apply for this re-greening program in Euclid.
We've already identified it, and we are looking to see if there is an opportunity. It's usually just small grant funds, about $4,000 or $5,000. Usually what you see.
But they're offering to plant trees that are appropriate for the area and not to interfere with their hydro lines.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for looking into that. 13.5. Anyone have anything to say about the regional meetings with Minister Josie Osborne and Minister Murray Rankin? Number 6.
Actually, I do.
Oh, okay. Go back to number 5.
Sorry, I had to flip the page. Just under the ICIP Environmental Quality Program, which closes like tomorrow. I'm just wondering if wow, Bruce. I'm like, oh, we have this new water line we need to do, but it's like tomorrow.
The infrastructure funding?
Yeah, the infrastructure funding,
tomorrow?
and I was just like, I just don't know if it's something that could have been. Yeah, I don't know. It was just something that popped into my head.
Yeah, I looked
It's
at that too.
Not really a question because 24 hours.
Not going to happen.
No.
Okay, 13.6, International Purple Day for Epilepsy Awareness. So this is another group that's hoping that we will light up our Euclid municipal sign with purple lights on March 26th in honor of epilepsy awareness. Possibly to staff. Is it possible to purchase purple lights as we did the blue lights?
Definitely possible if that's what council's prerogative is for staff.
I think it's an easy show of support.
Would someone like to make a motion to that?
I'll make a motion that staff look into some purple lights for March 26th, Purple Day, for our sign at the junction, instead of the blue ones.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in
Pinch,
favor?
I own purple lights, just saying.
All in favor? Any opposed? And carried. (13.7) Engagement on updates to British Columbia's geographical naming principles, policy, and procedures. This was an interesting read. Another acronym, BCGNO, BC Geographical Names Office. Someone's got a job. There are 4 opportunities for virtual engagement sessions, February 1st, 2nd, 8th, and 9th. Is anyone interested in sitting in on that? If not, there is an option for an online survey to receive our input, which I think would be easier than sitting in on yet another Zoom meeting. Is anyone interested in receiving that online survey?
I may pop on the 1st just because I can, and if I do, I do. If I don't, I don't.
Anyone interested in the online survey portion? Not so much? Okay. Moving on to 13.8. Sort and Go Organics is rolling up to the West Coast curbs this November. Again, they're offering an online info session February 10th, noon till 1. Councillor Kemps?
Can we make sure that this online information session is put on our Facebook page as information and yes, that would be great, yeah. There's just been a lot of communication with this rolling out, good and bad, not here, but in other communities.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. And number 9, 13.9, Island Health Information Bulletin. Island Health adjusting services to strengthen patient safety. Councillor Cole, do you have any comments on this one?
No, nothing new that we haven't been seeing on the news, and a lot of what's in there has been resolved and changed, and it's a fluid topic. So we were never diverting from Tofino, and staffing is stretched, but
Great, thank you. And number 10, seeking our support for Telus's application to provide improved connectivity to Highway 4 under the Connecting British Columbia program.
I find this very interesting because Rogers just put out a thing that they're going to do it, so too slow.
so
But support it.
I do believe the mayor has spoken. There's a meeting in the works next week with regards to
With
what's
Rogers?
Yeah.
I think it's still important to support Telus because we've been
Support
begging
both
them
and
for
support them
years.
both and see who comes out of the gate first.
So they have nicely provided a template for a letter of support, which helps staff immeasurably. So we would just be looking for a motion to provide that letter of support.
I will move that we provide a letter of support to Telus to improve connectivity. More or less.
Along Highway 4. Between Port Alberni and Euclid specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a seconder? Councillor Cole. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? And carried. Okay, information items. We have 2 information items. Resolution tracking is 14.1. That would be Ms. Mason, Manager of Corporate Services.
Good evening. The purpose of this report is to provide Council with a monthly status update on resolutions that have been adopted by Council and the follow-up of actions on there. If you have any questions, we can try to answer them for you.
Any questions from Council? No, you're off the hook this time.
I have one question.
Oh,
Is there's
almost, so close.
Sorry, I was like, wait a minute. What keeps on coming up, and this is just a question for a comment from anybody, is the ACRD and the multi-use trail. I'm just wondering to Councillor Cole if this has been because if there's no grants, are they ever going to just...
Yeah, so we're going into budgeting so it is still front and center topic. There were a few grants that didn't happen, and yeah, it's still a hot topic.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Mason. And our second item is the water main break. This is a verbal report from Mr. McIntosh, Director of Engineering Services. Welcome.
Sound check. I think by not turning. So through the acting mayor, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to provide a brief update concerning the water main break.
and also provide an opportunity to field any questions that council may have at this time. So I'll just spend a few minutes going through a little bit of background and context. I'll go through the sequence of events, what happened over the course of the last week and this week, and then an update about where we are and what this means in the next steps ahead. Next slide, please. So, briefly, the District of Euclid owns and operates two main water lines that flow from the District of Euclid underneath the inlet, about 600 meters to the foreshore area there. One of the lines then feeds Euclid First Nations with clean drinking water and fire suppression water as well. Another one of those lines flows from Mercantile Creek to the Bay Street Water Filtration Plant. Those lines were installed in the mid-80s, and as far as I understand, have provided services pretty much without fail since that time. Both of these lines are installed where that black line is, and they're in an area of the inlet which has is fairly shallow and has quite high turbulence as well through those ocean dynamics there, which can be seen in the lower right of your screen there. So this water line feeds a very important community, the First Nations. There's about 200 people there that rely daily, of course, on this water supply line. There's about 500 cubic meters a day that flows from the District of Euclid treatment plant to the First Nations. Next slide, please. So, top left there, what we know so far, and this is just speculation as we've experienced it. So top left, last week on Friday night, there was a volcano eruption in the southern Pacific Sea, and by Saturday morning, the west coast was on a tsunami advisory warning, and that included the District of Euclid and surrounding areas. On Saturday, it was observed in the inlet that there was high ebb and flows of the ocean. There was strong currents. Lifetime fishermen were reporting that they hadn't seen currents quite like that in the Euclid Inlet in their life. Sunday, all was well. Blue skies, the ocean was quiet. Monday morning we came into work, and the public works staff were just bringing reservoirs online, and we're expecting a little bit of water disturbance. What happened from there is we started to receive images of a water pipe floating in the inlet that shouldn't be there and was causing some concern. So very quickly, public works staff deployed boats and were on the scene investigating the floating pipe within about 10 or 15 minutes. And it became very clear that what had happened, what we were looking at was the District of Euclid's water supply line had become dislodged and was now floating in the inlet. On the right-hand screen, there is some correspondence that we've received over just chatter in social media, and it's first-hand eyewitness of people witnessing a barge acting in an unusual way in the inlet. And so we conclude that with the information that we have, there was a tsunami in the South Pacific Sea. There was incredibly strong currents that happened. It perhaps dislodged this water line from its ballast and weighting system, floated to the surface. It looks like on Monday morning, perhaps this barge came into contact with that floating line, and really completely unearthed it and dislodged it from its system. So severing the pipe from its supply side. From there, public works staff acted very quickly. By Monday morning, there was divers on site. There was an industrial process mechanical group on site as well, and the team went into action, removing that pipe from the inlet for inspection and to prepare immediate repairs, and began putting together an emergency plan to prep it for going back into the water. At that point, Public Works staff, district staff, put out community notices and started facilitating water hauling trucks from the district of Euclid to Coolthat First Nations, and that carried on throughout the week, about 10 trucks per day there. So lower right of your screen there, we can see some of what that damage looks like. It was severely damaged by the time we got it onto the ground there. So the damage was gouges in the pipe, rips and scuffling, and open holes in the pipe. Next slide, please. So top left there is more damage of that pipe. We can see there's open wounds in that important line there. And so what we were doing was we were repairing the pipe by removing segments and installing new segments, and then further assessing the suitability of the pipe. So we were prepared Friday morning to return that pipe back into the inlet and start working over the weekend to try to return water services to the other side. It became clear to us. I was engaging with local engineers and experts in the field of mechanical processing and these pipes in particular, and it became clear to us Thursday evening and into Friday morning that the wear on this pipe was heavily compromised, and the integrity of the pipe could not be verified in any way. It was starting to look like we could reinstall the pipe Friday morning as we were planning, and it might not work. It could be installed and last for a couple of hours. It might not pass pressure testing. It might go in and then cause more problems. It might last for a week, a month, 3 months, or 40 years. It was essentially introducing more risk into an already very risky situation. So at that point, it forced us to really consider all of our options. And one that became most clear, which we should focus on and increase priority, is to use the already submerged supply line, which is under the inlet close to this supply line as well, and do some mechanical processing and reorientating of our water filtration plant to then look at the feasibility of flowing water from our side back through that pipe towards Mercantile, and then connecting it with the existing system that provides water to Coolthat. So that has all been completed now. So as of today, this is I'm relieved and happy to say that we're now pumping water back through that line, which is currently dormant, and the system is now pressured up to the First Nations water reservoir. We're working with Island Health quite closely to follow all the requirements of safety and water testing, of course. And so water samples now have been sent off on a priority basis to be tested. And we're waiting for, we'll carry out another test tomorrow, and that'll be sent off as well. And there's just a requirement there of 2 tests in 24 hours. And so then after that happens, it'll verify that they're able to fill their reservoir without any further restrictions. So currently, where we are in terms of restrictions is Euclid doesn't have any water drinking restrictions. The residents of Euclid, and then the residents of Hitachi and Euclid First Nations, they're currently on a boil water advisory, and they'll stay on that advisory until Island Health has received a clean test on the quality of the water. We expect to receive that on Thursday, if all goes well. So water is there, it's in the system, it's ready to go, and we're just verifying its health and cleanliness, getting through our checks and balances, and at that point I would expect that those water restrictions to be reserved, and then all is essentially well. Next slide, please. So with that, it puts us in a bit of a position where we now have a a line that was dormant and not being used for quite a long time. And we have a line that's been damaged beyond repair. We have a community or water purveyors to that community. We have a community that's relying on that water. And we will be coming forward to council in the weeks and months ahead with some options about what we recommend is next best steps to take with that dynamic there. It might be options of replace that line immediately, and we have some options for funding. It might be to not replace that line and keep the current line in place, or maybe some other options similar to that. So, but looking forward to bringing council options to consider. So I'll just get to questions right away, but I want to absolutely thank the hard work and quick thinking of the Public Works team. Of course, I want to thank local engineers and the process mechanical groups that are working with us, and the District of Tofino, who offered and provided materials for us and support to get through this. And of course, thanks to Euclid First Nations for endurance and patience, and just hanging in there and getting through this emergency with us. So we're not through it yet. We have a really important few days ahead of us with testing, but we're in a much better position than we were a few days ago.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. McIntosh. We would like to acknowledge the efforts of our Public Works Department and the leadership for their work on the water line the past 8 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
No questions. I have talked to a few people who watched that tug go by that day, and it was a very low tide, which was unfortunate, and it was a very laden barge, and some of the logs had branches that were sticking down, and they watched the tug stop when obviously it got caught, and then the skipper revved his engine really, really hard to get untangled, and that's probably when the damage was done. So I don't know if there's any recourse with the tug company through to staff.
We are currently looking at all our recovery options. We're working with EMBC and to determine if they'll be able to assist us with any cost recoveries for the emergency that we occurred due to the tsunami linkage. We're having discussions on whether or not they agree with our assumption as to whether or not the tsunami was the initial cause. So if that is supported, then we'll be able to receive some funds that will help with getting us back to turning on the water. That's to be determined. With respect to replacement of the line, we are also looking at our insurance company as to whether or not they would be able to cover the costs of that. And then if that's the case, there's always the option for the insurer to pursue recovering those costs from other parties if appropriate.
That's great. Thank you for all your effort in that department as well. No other questions for Mr. McIntosh? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Council committee reports. I have nothing to report other than I will be attending the Vancouver Island Regional Library AGM this Saturday. It was originally going to be an option whether to attend in person or by Zoom, but that was changed, so it's strictly by Zoom, and that's from 9:30 till 1 o'clock on Saturday. Councillor Kemps.
Tomorrow, I just wanted to bring up, tomorrow I have a meeting with the recruiter for SD70, and he's doing the recruiting for the new superintendent. So if you guys, and it's at 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, so if you, it's just him and I a Zoom meeting, so if you guys have any questions or queries or anything that you want to see in a new superintendent, just text me, call me, whatever, beforehand, and I'll bring it up, bring it forward. I think it's really important that we get our voices heard there. Last week I attended the chamber meeting. This is the last week for the Shop Local initiative that we did with Port Alberni, Tofino, Euclid. So there's a few locals have won some really good prizes. They're like $500 prize packs. So scan away as you go into local stores for this last week. I should be on the Peak Radio on Friday doing the grand prize draws, and I heard there's a great resort. I think it's called Black Rock. That's one of the prizes. So yeah, start scanning those codes. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Hoare.
I couldn't find QR codes a couple of times, places that were supposed to have them. Yeah. Somebody said the co-op had one, but there was nothing there, so. There you go. I've been shopping local, but there's been, I attended the Wild Pacific Trail Society meeting on January 12th. And the biggest takeaway, kudos to Miss Fortune, was that they're looking at ways to increase the resiliency of the trail. So some sort of standard procedures for how it's repaired and how it's built and stuff. Just, because weather. Just saying. And that's, about it. It's been quiet in my world, unless you're a vegetable, and then it's not been quiet. But I'm going to just shout out and wish everybody a happy Robbie Burns Day. So everybody, sláinte.
Thank you, Councillor Hoare. Councillor Cole.
Something about all the seas gang dry. I can't remember the rest of it, but haggis and all of that. So ACRD meeting with the regional hospital meeting, it was mostly planning matters and electoral area reps only, so nothing to report there. Some technical difficulties with the Alberni-Clayoquot Health Network. It was quite annoying, but that happened also last week. I'm about zoomed out, I gotta tell you. Sorry if there's anybody out there zooming in right now. We still appreciate you there. And we did our open house thing for the OCP. That is now a big check mark there. That's done. Cross that off. That's it for this table, I think.
Great. And if Mayor Noel is on Zoom, he's welcome to raise his hand and offer his committee reports. No, he bowed out. Okay. Okay, so we're at question period again. This is an opportunity for the public to ask questions. Speeches and representations about bylaws that were subject to a public hearing are not permitted. Are there any questions from the audience? That would be a no. Paula, are there any questions by Zoom or telephone?
We do have a question. Excuse me. No questions by Zoom or telephone.
Okay, great. And have we received any questions via email to communityinput@euclid.ca?
We have received a correspondence. This question is from Nora O'Malley of the Westerly News. She asks, when was the last time the water main was inspected?
When is the last time the water main was inspected? The line, maybe, the line. I'll put that over to staff.
So in terms of understanding the maintenance history of the submerged water line, I'll be looking into that in full detail in the weeks and months ahead.
Thank you. All right, this meeting is adjourned at 6:10 p.m. Thank you everyone for attending.